Warahmatullah Barakatuh. We're at Speaker's Corner here. MashaAllah, cover Fef, Brother Muhammad, and of course, Brother Subboor. To be honest, guys, I had a bit of a niggle with him before we before we recorded it, because I was sending messages on Facebook and he hasn't responded. But it's great to see you, brother, mashallah. And this is my kind of platform where I like hosting. I don't know if you know my channel, but I like hosting and I can talk to people, and because it's more a personal effect than going into a debate and planning a debate at Speaker's Corner. So you mentioned your book, and if you don't mind letting the people know how many chapters and what kind of subjects will you be covering, or will it be different, like editions, meaning that will you just, I'm not going to say involved, but will you keep one edition or will you carry on?
Yeah, I was very close to completing the book some time back, and I decided not to go ahead. It's been a long journey, a difficult journey. I've changed my views on certain things like intelligent design, but now finally I believe I'm in a position to publish. So later on this year, I want to get one book out. It's not going to be all my ideas, but it's going to be a book on, I believe, the most important aspect of biological evolution right now, which is what is the validity of neo-Darwinism? That's it.
I know I'm going to take it back a bit, brother, and I apologize. You said you've changed your mind. What makes you change your mind?
So I'll give you an example.
Is that a difficult?
No, it's a good question. So obviously there's certain things that you don't change your mind. You don't change your mind on the fact that design is evident in nature. No one changes their mind on it. But then, what is the depth of that design? Is it the case that we believe in primary causation or secondary causation? Do we accept intelligent design as is proposed by the Discovery Institute? Do we reject that? In the past, I rejected. But over time, I've come to learn actually there's a lot of valid arguments they're putting forward. So based upon evidence and arguments and discussions I have with people, I change my mind.
But then I'm thinking there, like if somebody brings a good argument, you said 1 and 2, primary 1, primary and 2, didn't say, secondary, yeah. So if somebody brings an argument to the secondary, would that make you think about the first one, number 1, the primary source?
It can do, but it's not flip-flopping from the perspective the way that the waves of the ocean are endless. It's not like that. When you do learn a topic to a sufficient degree, it's not the case where you categorically only believe in one answer. You do see the validity of the other arguments as well. But then you come to a point where you grasp the topic quite deeply, and then you can be pretty certain that's the answer.
MashaAllah, but you are, MashaAllah, well versed in those topics, and you said you're going to write a book, and how far is it in the pipeline?
I would say the structure, the main argument, the main philosophy of it is there. It's there. I have on my channel a podcast. I started it recently called the Essay Podcast.
I'll be watching them.
Yeah, and on that podcast, what I've got is I've got atheists on there, I've got believers on there, academics. So, for example, I would have a professor from Oxford, a professor of logic. I would have, what's his name, Professor Williamson, for example, he came on. Stephen Law, again, another Oxford professor. Then I'd bring on people like James Shapiro, who is a Chicago geneticist. He's around like 87 years old. He's got lots and lots of peer-reviewed papers. So I'll bring on these people who don't necessarily agree with each other. So some of them, they believe in intelligent design, some of them reject intelligent design, but most of them are people who challenge neo-Darwinism in some way, shape or form. What's interesting about them is they don't necessarily believe in God. So it's not the case where they're coming at it from a religious angle. But then, of course, I'll bring on people who do come from a religious background, but are using logical and scientific arguments. So I have people like Paul Nelson, Casey Luskin, and Perry Marshall, who's neither intelligent design nor is he, a Darwinist. He's like in between. So you get interesting characters like that as well. So I'm going to be using those interviews as a basis for the book as well.
So you're going to add the dialogue that you've been having into the book and break it down? Is that what?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Because what it is, for example, if you take someone like Michael Roos, right? Michael Roos is a well-respected academic. He is the guy for things like the Oxford Anthology of the Philosophy of Biology. That's a big publication, right? You've got to be a heavyweight. So he's the editor of that. Then you have people like James Shapiro, who, in terms of biology, are the heavyweights. So my intention is to use not only their standard books that they've published and their peer-reviewed articles, it's the penetrating questions I ask them in the podcast. Sometimes they haven't never addressed those questions before. So, for example, Elliot Sober, he's a philosopher of biology. He said things in the podcast with me that he's never said before.
But this is what I don't understand is, like, for example, if you take something from the discussion that you have, for example, the dialogue, you take it, you put it into your book. Come a year later or 6 months later, the people who had that dialogue will probably change their mind. Will you have that conflict?
They won't really change their mind because sometimes they've never changed their opinion on that particular issue. They just haven't espoused it.
Okay.
So when you take someone like Michael Roos, Michael Roos is categorical that the mind-body problem can't be solved by science. Sorry, bro. Alex Rosenberg believes it can. And he's been consistent on this belief for many, many years. So it's not like they're going to change their mind. They may change their mind about certain premises of arguments, but not the overarching, usually not.
The core understanding will stay the same.
We're not talking about people in their youth. Like for a philosopher to be in their youth, maybe they're in their 40s or 50s, right? When they're sort of flowering in their peak, they're sometimes in their 80s. So we are talking about people who are quite mature in their views. They've thought about them deeply. They haven't come to them lightly.
Okay, over years. But that also comes with life experiences and books that they've been reading and coming across. So this is what I don't understand. What I'm trying to break down is that if you write a book now, and for you it's the argumentations or discussions that you previously had, you write it, and somebody who's in their 40s, before hitting the 80s and whatever, they change their minds with that book that you've already established. But you're going to use their argument, right? You're going to use their argument. But then, will they take that out and say, Brother Subboor, what you wrote there, it's an old argument. We don't use that argument anymore.
There is a risk of that happening. And in that case, I have to clarify and say, well, this person's changed their views. The thing is, this is the nature of...
That's what I was saying about the edition. That's why I said edition, because you're gonna have, if you do an edition of your book now, and then 6 months or a year later, you might do another edition.
Yeah, well, it won't be 6 months. It'll be maybe like 5 years. Yeah. But I do see your point. That does happen. They do sometimes change their opinions on things, but they don't change overnight.
Okay.
Like someone like Massimo Piglucci, who inshallah I'm gonna be using his arguments in my book. Massimo is somebody who has been saying the same thing for past 20, 30 years maybe, you see. So it's not very high risk that people change their mind. Even if they do, they'll change them for good reasons, and I'll have to include those reasons.
It's interesting. So yeah, the title of the book, what would you say? You haven't decided yet?
I'm working on it.
And there's not an Islamic theme to the title, it's like a general...
Yeah, because look, I think this is... sometimes this happens online, Muhammad, that when you are a public figure, you're speaking about any topic, people think, okay, you're an Islamic scholar, or you're going to bring in Islamic concepts. I want to keep my distance from it because I'm not an Islamic scholar. I am not somebody who someone should be looking at to get Islamic information. I can speak about why atheism is wrong. I can speak about the arguments for God's existence. I can speak about why Darwinism is false. I can speak about why intelligent design is valid. I can argue for the existence of God. But then to go deeper and talk about Islam. In fact, I get invited to talk about Islamic topics. I was even invited to host a debate between two Muslim academics who are going to have a deep discussion. And the problem is people mistake a public figure for an Islamic scholar. No, we're not scholars.
Exactly.
We're not scholars at all. And it's quite dangerous to think like that as well.
So you got some titles so far. Have you got any titles for your book?
Could be the death of neo-Darwinism.
Okay.
It could be the survival of the fittest, the evolution revolution. It could be different. Yeah. Still working.
Inshallah. So finally, brother, I really appreciate your time speaking to me. If anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you? Again, not Facebook, but anything else.
Facebook is old. I mean, I hardly use Facebook. To be honest, I'm very, like, if someone was to write me an email,
Okay.
that's more likely to get a response than Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. I sometimes don't check my messages on these platforms for a year.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, I have lots and lots and lots and lots of messages unread. And sometimes there's just too many people to deal with. But what I try and do, this is again something that you mentioned to me before about doing the podcast and stuff. I get loads of requests to do podcasts and collaborations. The vast majority of them I cannot commit to simply because I've already covered that topic before.
I understand.
And I don't like to cover things I've done.
Repeating again.
I don't like repeating the same thing unless it's coming from a different angle. So that's why I like developing stuff. And right now, I'm in my hermit stage of developing some new content.
MashaAllah. Fantastic. That's good. So your YouTube channel is?
My name?
Yeah.
Subboor Ahmad. And I'm also due to be debating this American atheist called Professor Dave Explains. He is somebody not important from a credential point of view, but somebody who we should address because of the amount of nonsense he puts out.
Subhanallah. Final question from me, and I'm going to let you go. Do you feel that each individual from a different continent of the world has a different thought process when it comes to debating? Do you get like extremes? For example, you mentioned America, the West. And even in Pakistan right now, I think there is unfortunately a bit of a rise when it comes to the youth not understanding Islam properly, so they become atheists or they start to reject the religion. Is that a controversial question or statement?
Not really. I mean, I think it happens like in places like Pakistan. Why some people would turn to secularism, liberalism, or atheism, it's usually not to do with, in my experience, and I've traveled a lot in Pakistan, different places.
I have seen.
It's not usually due to anything intellectual. It's more of a class issue. So when you become rich, when you're part of the upper part of society, you are expected to be liberal. You're expected to behave in a certain way, dress in a certain way, hold certain views. And people of a lesser financial position, they're expected to be religious. I think it's to do with arrogance. Because what happens, arrogance is something which is a barrier to truth. When someone's arrogant, they're less likely to accept what the truth is. When someone thinks they're better than others because they are richer, whatever it is, famous, anything, that person is making a barrier between themselves and guidance purposely. Anything else.
Jazakallah khair for your time. I really appreciate it. And inshallah, guys, if you haven't subscribed, check out brother's the channel and like and subscribe. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.